Hello everybody, my name is Kyle Lee from kiloloco.com, and today we are going to be going over how to parse JSON with local data. So the tools that we're going to be using today are Xcode 8.2.1, Swift 3.0, and a text file, or you could use a JSON file if you wanted. Either or would work fine. And some of the prerequisites for this course are that you know the basics of the Swift language and you know a little bit about optional chaining. Alrighty, so let's go over here and first let's look at our file. So I have this one called users API, and it's obviously not a real API, but I called it that just because most likely you're going to be getting your JSON back from a server, and generally it'd come back like this. It would probably be formatted a little bit better than this, a little bit more readable, but nonetheless it would come back like this. All right, and that's going to be the file that we're going to be using. So let's go over to Xcode, start a new project. We can start off with a single view application. Call it whatever you want. I'm just going to call this one JSON parser. Make sure language is marked to Swift. And then we don't need anything checked in here, and devices can be universal. It doesn't really matter. Let's go ahead and make that on our desktop. That's fine, or wherever you would like to make it. Doesn't matter. And then first things first, let's bring our file into the project. So I'm just going to drag and drop it up at the top. All right, make sure that copy items if needed is checked. It will probably work if it's unchecked, but if you were going to be using this in a real project, you're definitely going to want to make sure that copy items if needed is checked, and that the target is for whatever build target that you want it to be, which is probably going to be the name of whatever you just named your project. All right, so let's jump over to the view controller, which is where we're going to be doing all of our work. And it's not going to be a very beautiful app, but it should be giving you the basic idea of what you're going to be doing in a real live app. The only reason I'm not doing this in the playground, and you could do this, you could follow along in the playground. Things are just a little bit different, but the reason I'm not doing it in the playground is because sometimes it's a little bit confusing on how to transfer over the knowledge that you gain, and I just want to make sure that you understand where something like this could be put in a real app. All right, so first thing that we need to do is that we need to access our users API file. So the way that we're going to do that is that we're going to get the path for it first. So we'll do let path equal bundle.main path for resources right here, the first one. You want to do path for resources, and what we're going to do is for resources, the string that it's expecting here is the name of your file. So let's go ahead and enter that in, and that's going to be users API of type, and the type that it's talking about is the actual extension. So we want to do .txt, or no dot, I'm sorry about that, no dot, just txt. Right there, and make sure that it is, like, if you're going to be using a text file, make sure that it's .txt and not .text. If you were using a JSON file, then you would just put in JSON. It'd be this. Like I said, it could be whatever the file is, but it just make sure that it's the correct extension name, because Xcode can only read so many different types of extensions, and if you use an incorrect extension, it will not work. All right, next we want to, well, what we can do actually is let's print out that path just to make sure that we have access, that we have the actual, we have a valid path before we move any further. Because if we're working with the incorrect path, then it's just going to give us more problems down the road. Okay. this is going to have to load up. I have to load up a whole new emulator because it decided to do that. Okay, if you want, what we can do is we could take care of this this error, or not this error, but this warning. You might have noticed in Swift 3 that it doesn't like anything to be, it doesn't like using optional anything for anything anymore. Like, so if you print something out, they want to make sure that you have at least a defaulted value. So what we can do is we can do, if this was nil, if path was nil, we can do default. This is what the question mark stands for, is it's going to default to whatever you put right here. So not a real path. We could just do that, and we won't see it right here because it worked. And as you can see, our path is right here. We got the actual path working. But if this was not working, and I could show you that if I was missing the I and it tried to do it, we'll get this optional value right here. There's no more warnings on our project, and we could continue moving forward. That's just something that's a little bit new in Swift 3. So let's just build and run that. I just want you guys to know what that is. See, not a real path. So yeah, let's get it back to how it was, and let's keep moving forward. All right, so next, what we want to do, now that we have the path, the next thing that we want to do is we're going to get the URL for that path, because right now it's just a string, and you can tell that by checking right here. It's just a optional string, and actually we're going to do some optional chaining because we don't want an optional string. So we already know that's going to work, and we could force unwrap it, but I don't like force unwrapping. It's not good practice for code. So now we have to get our URL. So we'll do let URL equal URL, and we have to initialize this URL by doing file URL with path, and we're going to pass in a string, which our path is a string, and there we go. Now we have a URL. So now we have to get the data from that URL. So let's do another constant. We'll do data, and we're going to initialize this data with, let's see if it pops up. It's probably going to take a while. Contents of URL, and I don't know if you saw that, but it said it throws. It's Xcode's running a little bit slow on my machine right now. I think it's because I have the screen recorder going right now. As you can see, it's giving me an error call can throw, but is not marked with try. We could do this a couple of different ways. We could just force unwrap it and say that we know that this is going to work, and then this will make the actual red error go away. It's going to go away. Trust me. It's just my Xcode's working really poorly right now. Apparently the screen recorder's just taking up too much power for my computer to handle. So I'm just going to continue moving forward with the proper way of doing it, and that's by putting in a do catch block. So do, we're going to do that, and then if not catch, we're going to do that, and we're going to cut this right here, put it right there, and we're going to mark it with the try so that the Xcode is happy. If not, print the error. We just want the error. And by default, do catch blocks provide you with an error, a standard default error that you can pass in here. You don't have to initialize it or mark it or anything like that beforehand. So now we have our data, and if we wanted to check that, we can do print data. So we could go ahead and run this real quick, make sure that everything in our code is working up to this point. So if this won't be giving you back the data that you would expect, as you see when it pops up, it's going to show you the actual bytes. So obviously this isn't readable. It's just telling us how many bytes, and we can't really work with that. So what we're going to actually have to do is do some serialization of that data so that we actually know what we're working with. So let's do this. We're going to use some JSON serialization. And we're going to do let JSON, because after this we're going to have JSON. And we're going to do this is also going to be a try, but I'll let the actually let's just move forward properly, because this one throws and I don't want Xcode to blow up on me. So JSON serialization, there it is. And then what are we passing to it? We're passing data, right? Okay, so we're passing data, but what kind of data? Well, this data is actually going to be JSON. So we're going to be passing in a JSON object with the data that we have marked from just above this. So we're going to pass in our data. And with the reading options, you can see that you have really 3 of them. Allow fragments, allow mutable containers, mutable leaves. What we'll do is mutable containers. I won't really go into this too much, but pretty much it says that what you can do with the objects inside of this data is that you can manipulate them and change them around a little bit. So we're going to try to do that, and now we have our JSON. We don't have any real errors yet, but so the only thing that we need to do is just get rid of that warning, and we could do that by printing out this JSON. And if all went well and good, we should have our information. Wow, all that just to get the first part. Okay, so let's make sure that it's working first, because your API is generally going to do this for you. And as you can see, we have all of our data. So it's done alphabetically for us, which is kind of nice, but you can't expect what goes into the API. As you can see, it starts with ID, and it came back. This is still ID 1, but it came back in a different order. So never count on it to come back the way that it might be sending it. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. So for this example, all I'm going to do is just get the ID and the name of the user. We're just going to parse those pieces out. From there, you could kind of gather what we're going to do with the rest of them. I'll also get the company, because it is a little bit more complex thing to go into, because you have to parse it like twice. So you have to parse company, and then you have to parse out the BS and the catchphrases. So things like that. So we'll just do ID, name, and then we'll also do the company. So let's go back to our view controller. We'll hide this for now, and let's move on. So what we're gonna do is, since this is an array, we're gonna just mark it as an array. So let array equal our JSON as an array of any object. Or you could do any. Let's do any, because I think that's one of the new changes in Swift. And this is optional, so we have to do some optional chaining. We'll mark it with a guard, else return, right? And now what we want to do is we're going to do a for in loop. So for let's say user in this array, we got to go into it. So now this is where we're going to be iterating through the array. So as you can see in the JSON, we have this user right here. We have to go through this user right here, and so on and so forth. There's a total of 10 users. We have to go through each of them, and then we have to go into each of those users and then grab exactly what we want. We have to grab the ID, we have to grab the name, we have to grab the company. So let's do that. So for user in array, and we actually don't know what user is, we just know that it's of type any, so we want to cast this, and we'll cast it as user. We'll let user we'll do dict for dictionary equal user as, and we're going to mark it as a dictionary of string and any, because as we saw once again in the JSON, we don't know what's coming back. We might have a number, we might have a string, we might have a whole nother dictionary inside that. We don't know what we're getting back. So let's do as any, and we're doing guard. As you can see, I do like my guards. I like to put my guards up. All right, so now we have the user dictionary. So now we can actually finally start parsing things out of this dictionary. So what are the things that I said that we wanted? I said that we wanted the ID, the name, and the company. So there's a cleaner way of doing this, but since I'm going through and just going through each step, it's gonna be a little bit ugly, but you should be able to go back and refactor some of this code, make it look a little bit nicer. So guard let. And the first thing we want is the user ID. And this is going to be in the slot of the user dictionary that is titled just ID. And what kind of value are we expecting back? Well, this could be a integer, or it could be maybe a string. From my experience, a lot of this stuff tends to be integers. It tends to be strings. But we could go ahead and try to parse it as an integer and see what happens. As int else, or hold on, I'm doing that wrong. Sorry about that. Else, we're going to print not an int. And then we'll return. And once again, this isn't pretty, but it will get the job done for us. All right, so we also want the name. So once again, we're going to go into our user dictionary. Whoops, typing it all out. What are you doing, Kyle? And we're going to access the name key. So type in name. And this is obviously a string. No question about that. This one I don't need to check. If we don't get far enough in our program, then maybe we'll go back, but we'll see. Whoops, it's getting an error there because I didn't do that right. Okay, and then we also want our company. So guard let company equal user dict. It's not popping up for me, so let me type it in properly. And then we want the key company as, and what is this? What is our company giving us back? It's giving us a dictionary. So, and it's giving us a dictionary of string, and it's a string of strings, and we can see that here, but it's always better to be safe than sorry. I guess if you can guarantee that you're getting back what you expect, then you can mark it as string, a dictionary of string and string. And we're sure here, most likely what you're going to want to do is do any in a real world situation, but I know exactly what I'm getting back. And for the sake of parsing it a lot quicker, let's do it this way. Else return. All right, so now we have the company. So now that we know the company is a dictionary, now we want to get company name. So guard let company name. Or no, well, now we don't even have to do optional chaining because we know that this is a dictionary. Well, let's see what happens. Let company name. Because what I pass in may not necessarily be there. Company. And this is going to be name. And it's a string. And let's see what it gives us. It's an optional string because we don't know if it's actually going to have that value in it. So we do want to do optional chaining. That's what I was thinking. I just couldn't remember. Sometimes I'm just a little bit slow. We don't have to cast it as anything because we know that it's going to be a string, or else it's not even going to reach to that line. And then what we're going to do is print what we'll do is we'll print out the user ID. We'll print out the name. We'll print out the company name that they work for. We're not going to print out company because it's not really like, it would just give us this. It would give us this dictionary. We don't really care about that. And then we'll print out this empty string so that we get spaces in between each of those. So to go back and recap what we just did, all we did was we got the path, we got the URL for our file. We turned that file into data. We serialized that data with JSON serialization, and that gave us back the JSON as we expected it from our file. From that, we turned the JSON into an array of any, and now we're iterating through that array, and we're actually parsing. So this is all the parsing that we're doing. And if this works, oops, it's triggered Siri. If this works, when I press run, we should get each user's name, their ID, and the company name that they work for. So there will be 10 users. So we should get user ID all the way up to 10. It's running. There we go. It looks like we did it successfully, guys. And that is how you, oh, well, we still have some of the JSON being printed. We had it printed up here. See if we saw the JSON printed, so that's why it's coming back. But as you can see, this is exactly what you parse. So we got the user ID, the name, and the company name, and you can see that for each user. So that's just, it's a pretty simple concept, guys. You just have to understand, you know, first you want to be able to see your data, and hopefully you can get that data into some type of format where it's in a text sheet, or work closely with the person that's going to be giving you the data, or the documentation from the API that you're going to be getting it, so that you can have all these names listed correctly. You can see what types of values are being sent back. Like I didn't know if this was a integer or a string. We can try it as a string and see what happens. We actually won't get to a lot of our code because it's all in guards. If I were to change this to string, it may not come back. It may come back. I mean, integers can be probably cast as strings. We'll find out together. This I'm not really sure. I haven't tried this yet. So let's find out together. And that's really what coding is, guys. You just have to kind of test it out, see what happens. See, not an int. We got not an int. Well, it is an int. I didn't change the message, so it is an int that we're getting back. And we'll change this back to int. But if I would have turned that to string, then we could have seen, well, it's not a string. You're trying to parse it as a string, but it's not a string. We can turn it into a string later, do other things with it later on, but this is the essentials of just parsing. So thank you guys for checking us out. As you can see, you were able to go through, parse out some pretty complex data, because this company is a little bit more complex than just simple parsing. And yeah, I hope this helped out. If you guys have any questions or want any videos done, just let me know and I will make a video for that. All right, thank you.